that interest?
Totally. Yeah. It's actually kind of a funny story. So I would say I completely missed the boat on like the finance thing for my first 2 years of undergrad. So there are a lot of people I think that come in, especially to a school like Wharton, that's known for sending people, 70% of its graduates into banking or consulting. I had no idea what either of those things were until I was a sophomore in college. And I did a program at Penn called Huntsman. So I had a BA in international studies while doing a BS in economics. And so had the Wharton experience, but then also was in the liberal arts school. And so I kind of just missed that whole thing, particularly because I was studying abroad the second half of my sophomore year in Berlin, which is definitely not a financy kind of place, very much like a startup place. I was working as an editor at an English magazine. So really made it halfway through college without thinking about a lot of those things, which actually was kind of nice to get that reprieve from being overly career focused too early. And then my interest kind of grew organically. So over my sophomore summer, I read a bunch of books about the finance space. So I think a bunch of Michael Lewis's early stuff, and then ended up stumbling upon this book called King of Capital, which is like it's a journalistic piece, but I think Blackstone probably had a hand in sponsoring it. But it's a piece about the rise of Steve Schwarzman and how he and Pete Peterson founded Blackstone. And I read that book, and I remember putting that book down. I actually remember where I was sitting. I was sitting at home in my kitchen in California with my parents reading it. And I remember putting it down and being like, I have to work at this institution. And so then I started to talk to people, and I was like, okay, how do you get into private equity? And at the time, more and more firms in PE are now hiring directly out of undergrads, but at the time that was pretty rare. Blackstone happened to be one of the firms that did hire undergrad students. But everyone sort of told me, you know what, you need to do this investment banking thing before you can do this private equity thing. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to learn about what that investment banking entails. And so talked to a bunch of people at the different banks and really just got a sense for the incredible intensity of the job and the people that the job attracts. And I love that. So I love people that eat, sleep, and breathe what they do. I love sort of the competitive nature of it, but I also love that there's a dorky aspect to it. It was funny, every single investment bank that I interviewed with put me in FIGs. Every single one, Credit Suisse, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, and then ultimately Goldman. They were all like, oh, we think the FIG group would be a great fit for you. And I like the complexity. I like the structuring aspect. I like the fact that the FIG group in particular tends to be a little bit more analytically focused than some of the other investment banking groups. And so ended up at JP Morgan FIG for my summer, which is where I really learned about banking. And I would say, learned a lot about just what the lifestyle entailed. Probably didn't learn all that much substance because FIG is a hard area to pick up in one summer. And then obviously came to Goldman, and I think, that was really what cultivated my learning, was just on the job. It's hard to understand what it's all about until you've lived it. And I think that's the power of the internship. More and more people are hiring sophomore interns now. And so it's actually great because you can just try a bunch of things before you make the decision to go somewhere for full time. But it's funny, looking back, I would say the thing that I realized now in hindsight is when you're in college and when you're, 18, looking forward, every year seems like it's so critical. But in reality, a lot of it's luck-based. There's a lot of serendipity of life. And so, I didn't know when I went to JP Morgan that I would even consider re-recruiting for Goldman, things like that. There's just things happen, life happens. And so, enjoy, I guess if I had one piece of advice to give in this section, it'd be enjoy the process of it, right? Because it goes by so fast and you're learning so much you don't even realize it at the time. And so just really making sure you're stepping back and being what do I love about this? Why do I love it? I think that's a really important thing to do.